In this session, we'll examine the challenges of sustainable agriculture and explain how communities are overcoming them. By the end of this video, you will be able to identify key challenges facing sustainable agriculture adoption in Africa, explain how these challenges affect farmers and communities, and propose possible solutions for overcoming barriers in your own context. Sustainable agriculture holds the promise of feeding growing populations while protecting our environment and natural resources. Yet, despite its importance, many efforts to adopt sustainable practices in Africa face real-world hurdles. These hurdles include knowledge and training, finances and infrastructure, policy gaps, cultural practices. The first barrier is often the most fundamental. Many farmers don't know about sustainable practices or how to implement them effectively. In rural areas, there are often few agricultural extension officers, limiting access to hands-on guidance and technical support. Many farmers remain unaware of sustainable practices or how they could benefit their farms and communities. Communication barriers compound this problem. Low literacy levels and the absence of materials in local languages make it harder for farmers to learn about new techniques. Knowledge remains trapped in academic papers and urban offices rather than reaching the fields where it's needed. In rural Uganda, many smallholder farmers lacked access to agricultural extension services and struggled with declining soil fertility and crop yields. Limited awareness of sustainable practices and reliance on outdated techniques made their farms vulnerable to pests, climate shocks, and poor productivity. The Ugandan government and development partners introduced farmer field schools as a grassroots training approach. Instead of waiting for farmers to come to training centers, they brought education directly to farming communities. Farmers formed groups and met regularly in their own communities. Practical, hands-on sessions covered topics like composting, crop rotation, and integrated pest management. Most importantly, peer-to-peer learning fostered collaboration and knowledge sharing among farmers themselves. The impact was transformative. Farmers quickly implemented sustainable practices on their own farms. Local leaders emerged as trainers, creating strong knowledge networks that continued spreading information. Participants reported healthier soils, better crop productivity, and reduced costs from synthetic inputs. But most importantly, stronger community ties and support systems encourage innovation and problem solving, creating social resilience alongside agricultural improvement. The second major barrier is economic. Many sustainable practices require upfront investments that smallholder farmers struggle to afford. Installing drip irrigation systems, constructing rainwater harvesting tanks, or adopting solar-powered equipment all require significant initial costs. Smallholder farmers with limited access to credit or savings are often unable to make these investments even when they understand the long-term benefits. Even when farmers can afford new practices, weak infrastructure holds them back. Poor rural roads, lack of storage facilities, and inadequate market linkages limit farmers' ability to sell surplus produce. This discourages innovation since farmers cannot fully realize the economic benefit of their investments. Here's how Malawi addressed these financial barriers. Many smallholder farmers wanted to adopt conservation agricultural practices like minimal tillage and cover cropping. However, they faced significant obstacles like upfront costs for tools and equipment they couldn't afford, limited access to credit due to lack of collateral and weak market linkages that made it difficult to sell surplus crops profitably. A three-pronged approach emerged. NGOs partnered with local banks to offer small, low-interest loans tailored for agricultural investments. Farmer cooperatives allowed farmers to pool resources and buy conservation tools collectively, sharing access and costs. Extension officers provided training support on how to use the tools and maximize yields sustainably. Hundreds of smallholders began practicing conservation agriculture on their plots. Higher and more stable yields reduced hunger and increased household nutrition. Surplus produce sold through cooperative networks improved farmer incomes, while collective action strengthened social ties and improved bargaining power in local markets. The third barrier is policy-related. Government policies often inadvertently discourage sustainable practices. Government subsidies frequently favor chemical fertilizers and pesticides, making them cheaper than organic alternatives. This discourages adoption of practices like composting, agroforestry, or integrated pest management. Few countries have comprehensive plans for climate-smart agriculture. Without clear frameworks, farmers, NGOs, and private sector actors struggle to coordinate efforts or secure funding for sustainable projects. Kenya's agriculture sector faced increasing challenges from climate change, including droughts, unpredictable rainfall, and soil degradation. Farmers struggled to adapt because of weak policy support and limited access to climate-resilient techniques. In 2017, the Kenyan government launched its climate-smart agriculture strategy for 2017-2026, creating a clear roadmap for building climate resilience in farming. The strategy provided clear guidelines for integrating climate-smart practices into national and county-level agricultural plans. It encouraged adoption of water-saving methods like drip irrigation, soil restoration through composting and agroforestry, and drought-tolerant crop varieties. The policy strengthened partnerships between researchers, farmers, NGOs, and private sector actors to drive innovation and scale successful models, while training extension workers and farmers in climate-smart approaches. So far, the strategy has increased adoption of drought-resistant maize and water conservation practices in arid and semi-arid regions. It has expanded research into locally appropriate climate-smart technologies and strengthened collaboration between government agencies, communities, and development partners. The fourth barrier involves deeply rooted cultural and social factors. Many farmers rely on practices passed down through generations, even if they are unsustainable. Resistance to adopting new methods is often tied to mistrust of external advice or fear of failure. In some communities, shifting from slash-and-burn farming to agroforestry has faced skepticism despite proven benefits. Women, who make up a large portion of Africa's agricultural workforce, often face restrictions in accessing land ownership, credit and financial resources, and training programs and extension officers. This limits their ability to adopt sustainable practices and contribute fully to food system resilience. Here is how Niger addressed cultural barriers with promoting gender inclusion. In rural Niger, efforts to promote agroforestry and other sustainable practices faced strong resistance. Traditional farming habits were deeply rooted, and cultural norms limited women's participation in agriculture-related training and decision-making. Local NGOs and agricultural extension workers organized community meetings with a strategic approach. They discussed the environmental and economic benefits of agroforestry, addressed misconceptions about new farming methods, and engaged elders, religious leaders, and the male household heads in conversations about gender inclusion. Crucially, they highlighted success stories from nearby villages where women's involvement had improved food security, making the benefit tangible and relatable. The transformation was remarkable. Higher adoption rates saw farmers begin planting and protecting trees alongside crops, improving soil fertility and yields. More women accessed training programs and contributed to farm decisions, enhancing household resilience. Perhaps most importantly, there was a cultural shift towards increased community acceptance of sustainable practices and recognition of women as key contributors to farming success. Let's make this personal. Think about your community or region. What specific challenges do farmers face in adopting sustainable practices? Is it lack of knowledge and training, financial constraints, unsupportive policies, or cultural resistance to change? How might these challenges be addressed through training programs, policy changes, or community action? The key is understanding that solutions must be tailored to local contexts and conditions. Sustainable agriculture faces several significant barriers: limited access to knowledge, financial constraints, weak policy support, and cultural resistance. Overcoming these barriers requires a combination of innovative training approaches, improved financial access, inclusive policies, and strong community engagement. Success comes from understanding that change happens one farmer, one community, and one policy at a time. Despite these challenges, remarkable success stories are emerging across Africa. And in our next section, we'll explore detailed case studies of successful sustainable agriculture implementations that have overcome these very barriers.